Hello everybody. Today I would like to talk to you about my 93-94 Four Horsemen Pauper deck. This is a red and green deck, and let me explain to you what Four Horsemen means. It means the four expansions. You couldn't play any core set cards except for basic lands, and you had to play cards from Arabian Nights, Antiquities, Legends, and the Dark. Of course, reprints were allowed, as you see here, for example. Originally, this card was printed in Legends. So this also featured the approach that can be found in the Pauper community. So if a card is printed as a common in Magic Online, well, printed, of course, in quotation marks, then this card is legal. And this led to some interesting choices, but let me tell you about each of these things separately. So first of all, I should say that I had quite a good record with this deck. I got to semifinals and was defeated by a red and blue deck, which was a very popular choice in this particular environment. Everybody immediately understood that you should play red, but there was the question of the second color, and for me this was red and green just because of Curd Ape, and there is just some good synergy here. So, without any further ado, let's talk about the mana base. As you can see, you don't really have a lot of choice here. You don't have any dual lands, you don't have even City of Brass, so there is no idea of color fixing. So I just went with those basic lands, and I probably played too many, taking into consideration that there is virtually no land destruction, but in the end it proved to be the right strategy. I didn't play Silverstone, as you can see. So my idea with this deck was that every card is either a threat or an answer, or sometimes can work as both. And this approach was actually the right one, in my opinion. So we have got these marvelous Curd Apes, one signed and four black bordered cards, and they definitely worked very well. As you can see, there isn't a lot of removal in this meta, so they were incredibly helpful. Next, we have got Woolly Wolves. Woolly Wolves are a really interesting card. That's a really interesting choice, I would say, because you could tap to give any creature in play +1/+1 until end of turn, and it worked in many different ways. Of course, I could just pump my own creatures, I could use it as a combat trick, I could also use it to save my creatures from removal or from direct damage from some other cards, such as Combi Witches, or maybe my opponent's Chain Lightning, or my opponent's Pyrotechnics. With Pyrotechnics, it's also very interesting because how are you going to divide the damage if there is this wolf that can actually pump the creature? So they were really working well. I did side them out in some matches where we didn't have a lot of interaction. For example, my opponent had a lot of creatures with such evasion as flying, but generally I like them. So there's only one copy of Barbary Apes. I've got the rest of them in my sideboard. There is also Dragon Engine, which I really enjoyed. So by the way, I forgot to tell you that this deck is an unsleeved deck. So I actually played it for the first time in the last 22 years. I played an unsleeved constructed deck, and I absolutely enjoyed that. So the reason why I couldn't normally do that is that I have got a lot of collector's edition cards, so of course that wouldn't work. And I also have got some more expensive cards. As you can see, this Pauper deck is not super cheap either, but still I really wanted to play unsleeved, and I thought that it's one of the rare occasions where I can actually do that, and this is just such a great feeling. And of course, if you look at the backs of the cards, they are not necessarily identical. I don't know if we compare this and that, but again, the key here is trust, and of course I open to my opponents to maybe pick the piles as they would do that, so obviously, and they got Timmy's permission to do that, so I'm really happy that I managed to play it like this. So again, Dragon Engine, I'm really happy about this choice. I had 3 of these. Initially I thought about using Clay Statue, so for 2 mana +1/+0 until end of turn, that's not a terrible deal, I would say. And of course remember that if he is unblocked, this really makes your opponent nervous about that. That's sometimes we had a lot of mana, sometimes we had some longer games. So that was a nice choice. Rook Hack. Rook Hack is a great card here. Essentially, this is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, this might actually be correct, flyer in this meta game, in this particular sub-format, so to say. So it's always a pleasure to brew for such a format with limitations, you know, the restrictions breed creativity, as they said. And I really, really enjoyed just the format preparation, the brewing process for this particular tournament. This is I would say maybe one half of, maybe a bit less, but still a lot of fun if you talk about how you play and how you prepare for this tournament. So yeah, again, Rook Hack, how do we make this work, right? That is the question. We don't really have any mess removal, so what we can do is cast Emulation and attack with Rook Hack. So it already makes it some kind of a threat, so your opponent will think twice before letting it go unblocked. So this is a way to bait the opponent into blocking and then actually get this sweet Rook token. And another way, of course, is to kill it yourself. Fissure, of course, is not a good way to get 4/4 creature, but sometimes you can use pyrotechnics, right? Also not perfect, but at least could be somehow useful. And one of my favorite ways was to use Chain Lightning. So as you understand how Chain Lightning works, if you have got 3 red mana, and I did have that quite often, you can Chain Lightning your own Rook Hack, and since you are the controller of this damaged permanent, you can also pay 2 mana and then select the target of your choice, be it your opponent or your opponent's creature. So that worked really well. I really enjoyed that. And finally, there was this neat trick that you could attack and your opponent could block, for example, with a 2/2 creature, and then you could pump your opponent's creature with Woolly Wolf, and then it would actually destroy Rook Hack. So yeah, some funny things there. Then we had actually main deck Mountain Yeti. It's a bit of a pity that I didn't have the 4th copy, because I would actually play that, maybe over Barbary Apes, I don't know, but this was quite helpful. We saw a lot of red, so Mountain Walk was relevant. White, I didn't see that often, but protection from white, and it's a 3/3 creature, so was quite good here. Next, again, what's the reason to play green? Definitely to get big, beefy creatures. So here is those Darkwood Boars, and 4/4 for 5 mana. I'm still asking myself, I only have 1 copy of Darkwood Boars, so I'm still asking myself whether this was the right choice or whether it was the right choice to use Moss Monster. And I still cannot answer this for sure, because there were different situations, so 1 power would actually matter. That's true, but on the other hand, 6 toughness is a lot, so 6 toughness is virtually unbeatable in this particular environment. So I don't know, I like them both, and maybe I would have played another copy of Darkwood Boars if I actually had it. So again, as you remember, I mentioned that we played according to Magic Online reprint rules, and there were some nice surprises. For example, this card is not on the reserved list, but it is actually an uncommon, and it was never reprinted in paper. It is a Legends card. It was not in Chronicles, for example. So this card is legal there, and I only learned about it quite late. And one of the things I definitely regret is that I didn't play Jhelum Tome, and I didn't understand that it actually had been reprinted in 2020, I think, in one of those Commander reprints. So a lot of people actually capitalized on that, but I did not. But yeah, it was just too late to change anything, and I kind of completely missed that, even though I do like Jhelum Tome. So nevertheless, after the creatures, we have got Emulation. Emulation is an amazing card. It is very often underappreciated, I believe. So as you can see, it acts in many ways. First of all, it can pump your own big creature. So imagine, for instance, you've got Mountain Yeti that has Mountain Walk, and then you put it on him, he attacks for 5 damage. I sometimes even put Emulation on my Curd Ape if I saw that my opponent didn't have any ways of fighting against even those smaller creatures very early, so that was nice. And of course it acts as a kind of removal against your opponent's smaller creatures, so that also works, right? And I also mentioned the trick with Rook Hack to you, so I'm really happy about Emulation. Next, so we've got Chain Lightning. Again, we know that Chain Lightning is basically the bolt that is worse, but is it always worse? That is the question. So sometimes you could kind of play a game with your opponent, traveling this chain line, making this chain lightning travel back and forth, and it's very interesting how it works. And of course, the lightning bolt would be better, but chain lightning is also one of the reasons why so many people played red. Fissure, again, a great card. In this environment, 5 mana is not too much. You can definitely get to that. I just regret that I used the 3rd copy only in my sideboard. The same can be said about pyrotechnics, but nevertheless, Fissure is great. Instant land destruction, how do you like that? And of course, any kind of a creature can also be destroyed, actually buried, so that's also relevant. That's a great card, actually. So about pyrotechnics, again, it's one of the cards I really like, and here I just regret not playing all 4 copies. I was thinking about mana curve and so on, but then again, it's important to understand that in this particular sub-format, you have slightly different rules. So if in old school 93-94, pyrotechnics can be played, but not that often, then here it's the default choice. You have got a lot of creatures, you definitely should expect some aggro decks, and with this one you can easily kill 2 of your opponent's creatures, or just kill their creature and deal some damage to them, so we can expect this quite often. And finally about sideboard, so I mentioned 2 Barbary Apes in the sideboard. We also have got 3 Scavenger Folk. It's a pity that I never capitalized on them, because I did lose some matches because I didn't have Jhelum Tome, and my opponent was able to get some tremendous card advantage with that. But still, and Cat Warriors, I didn't really meet any opponents with green. Maybe I did during my play testing sessions, but in the actual tournament they weren't a lot of help. But it's a nice card, 2/2 Forest Walk for 3 mana. It's a rather good deal. What I was able to use is, of course, active Volcano. There is this blue counterpart of this card, which is called Flesh Flood, and it is similar to Red Elemental Blast, but it's a bit worse, as you can see, because it can destroy target blue permanent, but instead of counter the spell of the enemy color, it returns target island, or again, if you talk about Flesh Flood, mountain, to your opponent's hand. Not a perfect card, but still fun. And finally, I mentioned 1 extra copy of Fissure and 1 extra copy of Pyrotechnics that I would very often use after game 1. So there it is, this Pauper deck. Let's take a look at it once again. So I really enjoyed playing that, and playing unsleeved is an amazing feeling. If you do have a chance to do that with some of the cheaper cards you have got, you really feel that this is the way that it is supposed to be played. And the tournament itself was really a blast. I really encourage you to try, in case you haven't done that, to try some other sub-formats to somehow try and restrict the card pool, because it definitely brings out some creativity in people, and there are some attempts at breaking the format. You usually have more variety, and the format is not completely solved, at least during the first several times it is played. So that is all. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more deck tech videos and also some games with this particular deck. Bye!